Drew, thank you very, very much. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State Department. And Drew, thanks so much for not just great leadership, but for years of friendship. Drew was really the surrogate senator for the state of Massachusetts for a period of time. He was my director up there in the state and did an absolutely magnificent job. John, Jeremy, Andrea, thank you so much for being here and helping us kick off this forum. Thank you all for being here. It wouldn't be a forum without all of you here. And I am particularly grateful for your joining us this week. So let me build off that very generous introduction and put it to everybody pretty simply. There is no doubt in my mind that how we confront climate change will be certainly one of two of the defining issues of our generation, and perhaps the defining issue of our generation because of the stakes. The other being the rise of radical extremism, sectarianism, and the failure of states simultaneously surrounding it, and vast populations of young people needing jobs instead of mind-bending theories of false assumptions about Islam and other things. Both are gigantic challenges. But thankfully, the solution to this particular challenge, climate change, is actually just as simple as the realization that it is the challenge that it is. And as I have said countless times, including this past weekend when I had the privilege of speaking at the Milan Expo about the connections between climate change and food security and global security writ large, the solution to climate change is not generations away. It is not that difficult to comprehend. It is not a mystery waiting to be solved. It is, put quite simply, energy policy, clean energy choices. And it's staring us in the face. The opportunities are there. Many of the solutions are already developed. And as all of you know, as capital moves in those directions and as the economics begin to change, everybody else will begin to make a different set of choices. That's precisely why we have invited you all here today. It's why I'm really delighted to see such an extraordinary group, and you are extraordinary because you already get it, and you're already acting on it. And so we have investment leaders here today representing trillions of dollars of assets under management, focused not on abstract discussions, but on real, tangible initiatives that will actually bring about a clean and sustainable future. Now, I am well aware that I am speaking to an audience of experts. None of you need to be converted. And none of you, I'm sure, probably need to be exhorted, though exhort you I will. Particularly if you've been working in this space, you know that achieving a global agreement on climate change at the Paris conference this December is an absolutely critical step and a major priority of President Obama, myself, and the rest of the administration. But we also know that even the kind of ambitious and durable and inclusive agreement, with all of the advances that we have made since I first went to China 2 years ago to begin the negotiation with them to try to change what prompted the failure in Copenhagen, which was this great divergence between developed and developing countries, since then we have made actually enormous progress, and yet we know, even going into Paris, it will not get the job done. And so it's becoming even more clear with every record-breaking drought, every record-breaking flood, every hottest month ever announcement, or every year hottest year that we live through, with every peer-reviewed study that details the catastrophe that climate change could unleash, and frankly, that we're seeing already in certain places. You know, the canary in the gold mine, in the coal mine indicators, which are many in various parts of the world, particularly the Arctic, Antarctic, and in some other places, they all begin to detail the catastrophe that climate change has the potential to unleash. And with every passing day, it is actually getting more urgent that we get the job done, and we have to reach an agreement in Paris that will serve as the foundation for a low-carbon, climate-resilient future worldwide. But the road through Paris is paved with investment decisions that you're going to make not tomorrow, but today. Not in December, but in the next weeks, hopefully, and in the projects that we are working on and building together. Now, decades of science tell us that unless we make that transition, we are facing irreversible impacts to infrastructure, food production, water supplies, sea level, ecosystems, and potentially to human life itself on this planet. And the wake-up call is not new. Year after year, the science has been screaming at us. And as time goes on, we are seeing the warning cries of climate change, frankly, rising all over the world. The past decade was the hottest on record. The one before that, the second hottest on record. The one before that, the third hottest on record. 19 of the 20 hottest years in history have occurred in the past 2 decades. So the warning isn't new, but I'll tell you this, the alarm bells are getting louder. Now, someone who is younger than 29 years old today, 29 or younger, has not lived through a single month cooler than its 20th century average. And the good news is that even as we get a better and better understanding of the dangers of our carbon-based economy, we are also getting a better understanding of the many, many ways that we could improve the way that we power our world. So, my friends, the opportunities really are endless. I was in Spain yesterday, and I met a young man who has designed a smart heating system. I went to the Google center there, and on the first floor it's open to the public, and they had some demos of various entrepreneurs who are young kids starting up incredible things. And one of them had a smart heating system, and it's based on intelligent tiles that help users create heating zones to help target energy use, so that ultimately less energy is required to help people stay warm in cold weather. Pretty simple concept. There are lots of other variations of that in various ways that are out there and beginning to emerge. But in the age of the smartphone, when we can do this remotely and find and track what's happening, we have incredible means of providing efficiencies. And efficiency, as we all know, is one of the lowest hanging fruits. Grab, easy. And there are many places where they haven't even begun to reach for the low-hanging fruit. So you could control this particular system from your iPhone and remote, but it's the kind of innovative thinking that we need to see take root in every corner of the globe. It is the future. And it'll take the investments at all stages, from venture capitalists to pension funds, from project developers to green bonds, to begin to make it happen. Everybody here has a role to play in accelerating this movement towards the low-carbon economy. And the real kicker is, and I think most of you know this, but I'm going to say it anyway for the benefit of folks tuning into this, that the real kicker is that innovations in clean energy and energy efficiency, they don't just help stave off the worst impacts of climate change, they're also going to grow our economies, and they're going to employ our communities. And I don't have to explain to anybody here how big an opportunity that is. I can, for 28 years I served in the Senate, and it was rare that you got a really great plus back, positive return on a particular vote or choice that you made. If it was 1 for 1, you were doing pretty well. Climate change is what, 4, 5, 6 for 1? Because you get better health, better economy, better security, better environmental responsibility, better reduction of costs in hospitals. Run the list. The cost accounting here is really pretty simple. And it's pretty extraordinary to me that we haven't had more smart graduates of various business schools around the country who are leading corporations around America and the world who haven't raised the profile of this need to really account for things more correctly. Because everybody says, oh my God, we can't do that, it's too expensive. Well, it's not, if you consider the cost of not doing it. The cost accounting is pretty simple. On one side of the ledger, you have the cost of inaction. And most people don't ever file that cost. Then you have the cost of unimaginable environmental and agricultural degradation, of hospital bills for asthma. Biggest single cause of children in America being hospitalized in the course of the summer is environmentally induced asthma, and it costs us billions of dollars. We have millions of deaths linked to air pollution caused by the fossil fuels that we burn and the particulates that are in the atmosphere. The cost of rebuilding after devastating storms and flooding. Last year in the United States, there were 8 separate weather events in which the cost for those 8 alone exceeded $1 billion. And globally, I guarantee you we spent well more than $100 billion, and we're struggling to put together $100 billion for annual expenditure in order to deal with mitigation and other things to bring less developed countries to the table. Shame on us. You all have an ability actually to impact that with the leveraging and choices you make with respect to your investments. So that's just the first page of the ledger. The list goes on, and infrastructure maintenance in the face of rising seas, stronger storms, power outages, labor productivity losses due to extreme heat, all of that, not to mention the extraordinary costs of insurance losses. The insurance business is already ready to sign up increasingly across the world. So all of that has to be added to the cost of the wait-and-see approach of climate change. And compare all of that to the upsides. Multi-trillion-dollar market that has potential to create millions of jobs, making people healthier, communities safer, ecosystems cleaner, and the world more secure. What's that worth? This is not a very complicated balance sheet, and the bottom line is really crystal clear. And thankfully, more and more business leaders are coming to exactly that conclusion. Google, as co-sponsor of this forum, is today announcing its investment in the Lake Turkana wind project in Kenya. This investment will bring 310 megawatts of cheap, clean, and renewable energy into Kenya's grid. And once constructed, it will be the biggest wind farm in all of Africa and the single largest private sector investment in Kenya's history. At the White House Clean Energy Investment Summit last June, a consortium of long-term investors committed to build a new multi-billion-dollar intermediary that will identify, screen, and assess companies and projects for the commercial investment that also produce impactful and profitable solutions to climate change. And that consortium will officially launch today as Aligned Intermediary, or AI. And later this afternoon, you'll hear from its co-founder and CEO, Peter Davidson, who will discuss the extraordinary investment capital commitments that AI has already received and introduce the members of the advisory board who have helped to deliver this remarkable commitment of capital for AI's work. Now, OPIC signed a new agreement to provide up to $400 million in financing for the Redstone Concentration Solar Power Project in northern Cape, South Africa, and it's a large-scale solar facility being developed by Solar Reserve, an American company, and Aqua Power, which is a Saudi firm. Now, I know many of you here today are pursuing similar investments, and I really couldn't be more grateful, and I say that less as a Secretary of State and more as a parent and grandparent, because these are the kinds of projects that are going to help the world transition to a low-carbon economy. They're the kinds of projects that will help us honor our responsibility to future generations. They're the kind of projects that literally can save the world. And the State Department, Georgetown, and Google came together to convene this conference in the hopes that the connections you make over the next 2 days, the discussions that you'll have, the opportunities that you'll discover, will unleash a wave of new interest and new investment and new innovation in the technologies and adaptation strategies that will change the energy game. And we also hope we can diversify the flows of public and private climate finance. And today, 90% of private climate finance is invested into projects in the same country from which the money originated. And we need to develop better pathways to sustainable development into new and emerging markets. And we can't solve climate change at home if you ignore what is happening abroad, because increasingly it is developing countries that are coming online, and unfortunately too many of them forced into a coal-fired power plant without any remediation whatsoever, and obviously that's a disaster. So our goal is to find ways to accelerate collaboration across borders and sectors. And I assure you, we in this administration want to help move you forward, not hold you back, not stand in your way. And this afternoon at lunch, you're going to hear from a few programs that we have designed to facilitate more private investment into climate and clean energy projects in emerging markets. For example, today we are launching the Clean Energy Finance Facility for the Caribbean and Central America, which was an initiative first unveiled by President Obama last April. And we know that our neighbors in the Caribbean and Central America have abundant renewable energy resources, and yet they suffer from electricity shortages and high prices. In Jamaica, a kilowatt hour costs nearly 4 times as much as in the U.S. And this program is going to provide early stage funding, including $10 million in its first year alone to clean energy projects to help catalyze greater public and private sector investment that will make all the difference. Tomorrow you'll hear from my friend and colleague Ernie Moniz, Secretary of Energy, over at Georgetown University, our generous co-sponsors for this forum, and thank you, Jack, very much for that. Ernie will discuss the steps his department is taking to commercialize new clean energy technologies and help achieve our climate goals. In December, Ernie and I are going to join representatives around the world in Paris. I think the longest that any Secretary of State has ever been out of country in one place was my vacation in Vienna with the Iranians. The 19-plus days that I was there. But next to that, I will be in Paris from almost November 30th through the end in order to try to help make sure we can achieve what we want to and close an ambitious and durable climate agreement. So let no one doubt that a global agreement is an essential part of this. But ultimately, my friends, I got to tell you, because of the problem, and by the way, even as federal governments in many cases may be restrained, we're our own worst enemy in many ways. We have politicians today who refuse to utter the words climate change, let alone do something to address it. But thankfully, President Obama and many of his counterparts view things differently. And they're joined by entrepreneurs, scientists, activists, others. We just had an event here a week or so ago with Mike Bloomberg in which we brought mayors from around the world. And mayors are beginning to do things at local levels, getting way ahead of the federal governments. Grassroots may be the saving grace, and you are grassroots. And if you all make the right set of investments and the market begins to get the message out of Paris, what we have to hope for, and I think even count on, is that there will be a remarkable multiplier effect that comes from the signal sent that more than 150 nations have now signed on with their intended national determined contributions, that is, their reductions. And frankly, I think we can safely say that did come about because we partnered with a less developed country, a giant of one as it is, China, and sent a message we can no longer afford to play by the same old rules of fighting each other and not all of us collectively becoming part of this solution. So I thank you profoundly for being part of this forum, and over the next 2 days, I think we can do a lot to help get the job done. Thank you all very much.